we are here at Integral Leadership in Action. It's May 2012 in sunny Santa Cruz, California. And I'm here with Cindy Wigglesworth, who is one of the powerhouse leaders in the Integral community. And we're super excited to talk to her today about Integral Feminine Leadership. I'm going to turn it over to her and just ask you, what's hot for you right now, Cindy? What's going on in your life that you want to share with the Integral chicks out there?
Cool. Just a quick background for folks is that I started my career at Exxon, which is the ultimate masculine kind of work environment. Worked there for 20 years in human resources and was able to be successful inside of that container. And then eventually outgrew that container and left in 2000 to form my own business. My specialty is around spiritual intelligence, but I'm framing it these days as one of 4 intelligences. So I teach deep intelligence, 4 key intelligences for leaders. And my particular niche allows me, because I have my spiritual intelligence assessment that I created and validated, to bring multiple tools to the party and select which ones are appropriate for a given client.
Oh, that is fantastic. And being kind of an integral geek, I love assessments.
Yeah, totally.
So.
It makes it concrete, which is absolutely critical for my clients. Puts it in skills, language, and they can see, oh, I can learn this, I can build this.
Right.
For Orange Achiever Energy, as you know, that's really critical.
Yeah, they know where they're at and they know where they're going, right?
Right.
Basically, yeah. So that's very cool.
Exactly.
Well, it's awesome to have you here today.
Thank you.
And basically what we wanted to do is we're really trying to define integral feminine leadership. Like, what is this all about?
Right.
And for me, as a woman, I've never really completely felt comfortable with sort of the traditional expectations of leadership. Being loud or, taking a seat at the table, and kind of that doesn't quite fit me. And so I often ask, is there a different way to lead as a more feminine being? And I don't have the answers. That's why we're talking to a great, awesome women like you, and to just say, is that required? Is there a different way to lead where we can bring our full selves as women and as more feminine beings? And I'm actually not particularly super feminine, but I'm trying to live into that edge more and more. And so that's where I'm at, and I'm just really curious if you have any words of wisdom or what your experience has been like with that.
Right. So I will tell you, I'm obviously a little older than you are, that I grew up when the feminist movement was really first breaking ground and women were really first moving into management.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty unusual thing for women of my generation to be stepping into management roles.
Right.
And clearly we had to take on a fairly masculine persona to be successful in that. But, sort of breaking the ground of even getting in was a big step.
Yeah.
I've thought about this on and off now for most of my adult life because I grew up in that sort of feminist wave, and it's reoccurring for me now with the sort of pullback of our society and feminism having to get out there and march again.
Yeah.
It's like, didn't we do this once already? But I think one of the problems is getting clear about terms, and you can't find the right solution for the problem if you're not clear about the problem and you're not clear about the variables. Okay. So the variables, to me, I make a strong distinction between the terms masculine and feminine, and woman and man.
Yes, definitely.
And for the feminist movement, it was the issue of woman.
Yeah.
It was just you had the wrong genitalia, so you couldn't have the job.
Right.
And when I was thinking through these questions that you sent me ahead of time, and I was pondering, what would I say? I would say, well, the clearest place to start from is the biology, woman and man, and the package that comes with that, which comes really, for me, if I simplify it in 2 pieces. The biological parts, which we can't do anything about, right? At least not at this point in time. Who knows what the future holds? But at this point, our role in reproduction is a drastically different role than the male role in reproduction.
Yeah.
And that has huge consequences in terms of hormonal fluctuations and our health problems and going out for pregnancy leaves and, those kinds of things. I mean, men can't, they don't have ovaries and they don't have a uterus. That's kind of the bottom line, right? So that's a distinction we have to live with. Yeah. And I've become, as I've gone into menopause now, really humbled by what happens with our hormones. And when in the 60s, I would have screamed at somebody who said, you know, well, you're just having a hormonal issue, I would have said, how dare you?
Yeah.
But now I'll say, hey, I'm having a hormonal problem. You know?
Yeah.
And what's been fun and interesting for me to learn is as my doctor tinkers with my hormone levels to see how I'm feeling, the impact of testosterone, which gives me great compassion for the male perspective in the world.
Ah, yes,
You know?
yeah.
So as my estrogen goes up and down, I have different sensations in my body. As my testosterone goes up and down, I have different sensations in my body. And I've really come to appreciate, from a spiral dynamics kind of a viewpoint, developmentally, you know, testosterone is a really important part of leadership. It's a really important part of leadership, especially at Red.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that is the place where women are weakest. Because our hormones are lower in testosterone. Like, so how do we get that, you know?
Yeah.
So how do we do Red without testosterone? Is
Right.
probably a really core question, without sacrificing everything we own, everything we are, and turning into raging bitches, which is what we often get accused of being when we try to do a power move. And I was, by great synchronicity, turned on to a researcher at Harvard named Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y.
Okay.
And she and her partner had been doing research on how you can instantly raise your testosterone level using your body posture. And they went from primatology to human biology looking at that. You know, so like alpha gorillas have higher testosterone and lower cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone.
Okay.
If the alpha gorilla dies or for some reason is removed, you know, the subordinates who previously had lower testosterone, higher cortisol, whichever one takes the role, within 2 days is testing at high testosterone levels.
Wow.
So it's not that the testosterone caused the alpha.
Right.
It's like the alpha position created more testosterone, which is like a reversal of expectations.
Right.
You know. So she then went on to say they've done this study with humans that just holding certain body postures for 2 minutes will raise your testosterone level. It will last long enough that you're much more likely to like get a job in a job interview.
Wow.
They did controlled, blind job interviews.
Okay.
And people, male or female, who had held open body posture, shoulders back, arms extended, like Wonder Woman poses.
Right,
you know, she
right,
actually did the Wonder Woman pose on the air. Would even later, 15 minutes, an hour later, be more confident and more likely to be hired by a significant margin.
Oh my goodness.
Which is amazing. So like tip number 1 for women, shoulders back, arms out. When you need to demonstrate confidence and you think about how we're socialized as women to curl.
Right.
And to chin down.
Right.
All these sort of things that our culture has imposed on us, we're no longer bound by that. Our culture's changed a lot, but we just have to be aware. Lift your chin, pull your shoulders back, raise your testosterone level. Now go in and see if you can't do Red from a peaceful place.
Right. And isn't it interesting that that's actually an open-hearted stance as well? So you're raising sort of the, you know, in the upper right kind of biological aspect is being raised at the same time that you're kind of open and receptive, which is a more feminine characteristic. So that's cool. That's really cool.
So, you know, I tend to go to where I can to the sciences. I have a strong orange in my bar coding of color systems. I love orange.
Thank goodness.
And it works well with business, you know, where you can talk orange, you can be successful. So I would say, you know, as I was thinking through what makes for successful future leaders, as we kind of look to the future, which is less prejudiced, hopefully, I would say there's sort of an interior androgyny that we're all going to need. And it's reflected in the multiple intelligence schema that I use.
Okay.
If you look at the 4 intelligences, physical intelligence, IQ, emotional intelligence, or EQ, and SQ, or spiritual intelligence. IQ, fairly gender neutral.
Okay.
Men and women, equal innate capacity given equal education. Okay, so we all have good IQs.
Okay.
EQ tends to favor women.
Right.
Women in general tend to score higher than men in general. Now these are overlapping bell curves, so any given man could score higher than any given woman, so we don't want to overgeneralize here. But women tend to have natural abilities in empathy, which I think relates to the fact that from a Myers-Briggs standpoint, 75% of women are feelers.
Oh,
So sometimes I think we confuse gender and typology.
Yes.
But if you think about most women are feelers, that changes the way in which we've communicated with each other as women, even if you're thicker like me. Our peer group has expected empathy.
Right.
Right? It's sort of demanded. So we've been trained in empathy, where the men might not have been. They might have been trained in King of the Hill games.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And research around men who have an XYY chromosome base, or really high testosterone levels, biologically based, they are very aggressive. They are prone to rage. Women who have XXX chromosomes, triple X, very high estrogen, tend to be very submissive. So all of these things are interacting, right? But in the female-to-female relationships, we've tended to develop listening,
right,
and empathic, nonverbal attentiveness.
Right.
Men have tended to develop the emotional intelligence skill of self-control, so they will tend to outscore women on self-control.
Yeah.
So what do we need to learn?
Inside.
If we're androgynous, what do we need to learn? The men need to learn the empathy, the women need to learn the emotional self-control. Like, when is it that you don't ever cry?
Right.
I've seen women who burst into tears in meetings just destroy their credibility.
Yeah,
Go to the bathroom later and cry.
Yeah.
Do whatever you have to do. But in that moment, it's a complete power abdication. And if red is what's called for, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so I think there's things that we can both learn, both genders can learn from
Right.
emotional intelligence. The most highly developed, most successful CEOs tend to have high EQ.
Okay.
So you see that the genders, you can learn any of this regardless of your gender.
Right.
Now, in spiritual intelligence, when
Yeah.
we did my research, we found that the women tended to outscore the men on about half of the skills.
Okay.
If you look at the general population, and there's 21 skills, so somewhere 12 to 14 skills, women have a statistically significant higher score.
Okay.
However, when you looked at people who were overall highly developed in SQ, the gender difference diminishes.
Okay.
And men tend to score higher on complexity of thinking as one of their skills. Women tend to score higher on making compassionate and wise decisions. Which is kind of interesting, you know.
Yeah.
But
It's like they have the information, but
yeah.
we know what to do with it.
Potentially, yes. But then you think, what's the offset? Are we giving up anything? You know? And so as I say, moving towards androgyny does not necessarily mean moving towards boring. I know sometimes people say, well, if we all become androgynous, our sex lives would be terrible because there'll be no polarity.
I felt that in myself as you said it. It was like,
boring.
Really?
Yeah, boring.
Well, just like I wanted to rebel against it almost. Like, no, that's not true. You know, but
yeah. So in theory, as we become really embodied and integral, we can choose the color we show up at. Like I can be using spiral colors here. I can from yellow do red.
Right.
Or I can, if to use integral colors, I can from teal do amber or below, magenta, whatever.
It's called for,
Yeah, so you do what's called for from a very different interior space. So it's red in the exterior energy manifestation, but yellow in its interior motivation. So it will feel quite different. As a woman doing red, I do not have to be a man.
Yes.
I just have to be power.
Yes.
As red is representing power. And the gap I see with a lot of women is they're kind of afraid to say no, or to stand their ground, or to fire people. Now, interestingly, I see the same thing in men who are feeling style on the Myers-Briggs. So I think it's not necessarily just men and women. I think it's also a typology thing. But like learning to stand in your power and let your no mean no is a crucial skill. Yeah. Really crucial skill. So the trap I think we find is that when people talk about women in leadership, they're often describing leadership styles preferred by green.
Okay.
And a workplace is not one color.
Right.
A workplace has all of those colors in it.
Right.
So a successful woman in a C-suite job is going to have to be able to do the red power, the blue authoritarian, the orange strategic, all of it. But do it from hopefully a yellow altitude of understanding.
Right.
And that's a demanding thing. I mean, there's a reason there's a small number of people at Integral. It's hard work.
Yeah. So really being able to kind of wield and live the spiral from that higher place is key.
To me, it's important. Now, while you're waiting to get there, because it takes years of practice to get yourself there, can you find a kinder, gentler place to put yourself where you're not, the red and orange and its more toxic forms are not in your face, because those tend to be the hardest for, stereotypically, for women to deal with. So you would want to find a place that's as healthy as possible at whatever stage it's at, and hopefully has a little bit of green going on, so there's some empathy, feeling, IQ, and EQ balance. Green sometimes goes too far in the EQ and the consensus and the hugging and goes out of business. So,
yeah.
so the challenge is don't give up the other stuff.
Right.
You know, that's the transcend and include mood that Ken always talks about.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That was like packed with so much information. Yeah.
You're welcome.
So I appreciate having you here, and thank you all for tuning in.